Welcome back to Wealth of Words, where we unpack some seriously fascinating reads that offer a fresh take on the world. I'm Richard, and I'm thrilled you're joining us.
And I'm Isabel, excited to dive into today's book with you and Richard.
So we're cracking open the Practicing Stoic today by Ward Farnsworth, a deep dive into how this ancient philosophy of Stoicism can be surprisingly relevant to our modern lives. I think a lot of people hear Stoicism and they picture these emotionless, rigid folks.
Yeah, it does have a bit of an image problem, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
that's really a misconception. What's interesting is that Stoicism is less about suppressing emotions and more about mastering them, understanding how our reactions to events, big or small, are often what causes the most distress.
Right, it's that classic idea you can't always control what happens to you, but you can control how you react. And Farnsworth does a really incredible job of breaking down the Stoic toolkit for navigating, those everyday challenges with a sense of calm and, dare I say it, even resilience.
Exactly. And we're going to unpack some of those practical tips and techniques today, from understanding the power of perception to focusing on what's truly within our control, and maybe even tackling some of those pesky desires that, keep us chasing things we don't really need.
Absolutely. And before we get started, a quick reminder to follow Wealth of Words and let us know what resonates with you. We love hearing your thoughts and feedback. All right, let's get into it. One of the first things that Farnsworth emphasizes is this Stoic idea that it's not events themselves that cause us distress, but it's actually our judgments about them. It's so simple, yet so powerful.
It really is, and it's something that most of us do unconsciously all the time. He uses this great example: getting stuck in traffic. Most people's immediate reaction is frustrations, right? But that frustration isn't actually caused by the traffic itself. It's caused by our judgment that the traffic is this negative, inconvenient thing.
Yeah, it's like we automatically label it as a bad experience, and then that label kind of dictates, our emotional response. But what if instead we saw that unexpected downtime as a chance to listen to our favorite podcast or catch up on some thinking, maybe just even enjoy a few moments of quiet?
Precisely. The Stoics were all about, finding the opportunity in every situation. They had this three-stage process: event, judgment, reaction. And that middle step, that judgment, is where we often have the most control.
So it's not about denying the reality of the situation. It's about choosing how we interpret it. And this reminds me of what the 16th century philosopher Michel de Montaigne wrote about how if evils only impact us through our judgments, we have the power to either reject them or transform them.
Now, that's a powerful notion, and it ties in beautifully with one of Epictetus's analogies about a sea voyage. Imagine you're setting sail on a ship. You can choose the ship, pack your supplies, pick the date you set off, but once you're out at sea, you can't control the storms, right? Wow. And Epictetus says our judgment is like the captain of that ship. It's steering us through those choppy waters. We can let the storm toss us around and just give into that panic, or we can focus on navigating it as best we can, knowing that we have the skills and the resilience to kind of weather it.
And he also compares life to a game of skill and chance, emphasizing that we can't always control the roll of the dice, but we can absolutely control how skillfully we play the game, regardless of the outcome. I love that analogy. It speaks to the Stoic emphasis on finding joy in the process, not just being fixated on the result, right? It's not about resigning yourself to whatever happens. It's about taking ownership of your actions and your attitude within those circumstances.
And that's where this idea of mental training comes in. Stoicism isn't about passively accepting whatever life throws at you. It's about actively building the mental muscles to respond in a way that aligns with your values and your principles. It's like training for a marathon, you need to practice and build up those inner resources.
Absolutely. Kind of shifting gears a bit, another key principle in Stoicism is this idea of transience. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, really drove this point home in his writings.
He was big on that cosmic perspective. When we zoom out and consider the vastness of time and space, our everyday anxieties can start to feel much smaller. It's like Montaigne's example. Imagine a creature whose entire lifespan is just a single day.
From our perspective, that's just a blip, right?
Yeah.
But to that creature, it's a lifetime filled with all sorts of experiences and emotions. The point is, our perception of time is relative. What feels like this huge deal to us right now might be completely insignificant from a larger perspective.
Yeah, and it's not meant to be depressing or make us feel like our lives are meaningless. On the contrary, it's about liberating ourselves from that narrow focus on just the present moment. It allows us to face, life's ups and downs with a bit more wisdom and maybe even a little humor.
It's about finding that sweet spot between taking our lives seriously but not taking ourselves too seriously.
Exactly. Now, shall we delve into the Stoic perspective on desire? This is where things get really interesting. It's often where Stoicism gets a bad rap for being, overly strict or joyless.
Yeah, people hear Stoicism and think they have to give up everything they enjoy, but that's a total misrepresentation, right? It's
Yeah.
not about denying pleasure. It's about understanding how our desires can sometimes lead us down this path of constant wanting and never truly feeling content.
Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, put it brilliantly when he asked, "Who was ever satisfied after attainment with that which loomed up large as he prayed for it?"
It's that classic experience. You finally get the thing you've been striving for, and it doesn't bring you the lasting happiness you thought it would. It's like chasing a mirage.
And this brings us to Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher heavily influenced by the Stoics. He argued that satisfaction is relative, fueled by that gap between what we achieve and what we expect. So as our achievements grow, our expectations often rise right along with them.
It's like this never-ending treadmill. The Stoics recognized this, and they differentiated between natural desires, those basic needs for survival like hunger and thirst, and unnatural desires, things like status, wealth, luxury.
And those unnatural desires are often the ones that spiral out of control. It's not that these things are inherently bad, but when we tie our happiness to attaining them, we're setting ourselves up for potential disappointment.
Seneca believed that desires rooted in vices like greed, envy, and ambition can lead to endless longing. He contrasted these with desires rooted in virtue, which are typically more fulfilling and sustainable.
And Montaigne added to this conversation by pointing out that while material poverty can be remedied, spiritual poverty, often driven by these insatiable desires, that's a much tougher nut to crack.
He also talked about how envy fuels our desires, making happiness even more elusive. We get caught up comparing ourselves to others, wanting what they have even if we wouldn't have even desired it otherwise.
It's that constant comparison game that keeps so many of us stuck. And this, I think, is where that Stoic idea of mental training comes in once again. By understanding the nature of our desires, we can actually retrain our minds to focus on what truly matters. And this, in turn, leads to a more contented and balanced life.
It's about choosing to break free from that cycle of wanting and finding peace in what we already have.
And I think that's such a valuable message, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us we need more, more, more. Stoicism offers an alternative path, a way to find contentment and peace within ourselves.
It reminds us that true happiness isn't found in chasing external things. It's about cultivating a sense of inner peace and alignment with our values.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about how we actually put this Stoic wisdom into practice. Farnsworth highlights some really concrete techniques, and one that stands out is the practice of negative visualization.
Okay, that sounds a little counterintuitive at first. Isn't Stoicism about focusing on the positive?
It is, but this technique is less about dwelling on the negative and more about mentally preparing for those what-if scenarios that tend to cause us anxiety.
So instead of pushing those fears away, we actually lean into them.
Exactly. It's like a mental form of exposure therapy. If you're worried about losing your job, for example, you might spend a few minutes visualizing what that would actually look like and how you'd handle it.
So you're taking control of that fear instead of letting it control you.
Precisely. And often when we really face those fears head on, we realize they're not as terrifying as we imagined. We might even start to come up with solutions or backup plans, which further reduces that anxiety.
I see. And by contemplating the potential loss of something, we might also start to appreciate it more while we have it. It's like a reminder to not take things for granted.
That's a key point. It's about shifting our perspective and cultivating a deeper sense of gratitude for what we already have.
This actually reminds me of another Stoic exercise called the view from above. Have you ever tried that one?
Of course, it's incredibly powerful for gaining perspective.
It's this practice of imagining yourself rising above your immediate surroundings. You see your life, your city, your country, the whole planet from this cosmic viewpoint.
And suddenly those everyday worries can seem a lot smaller.
Right. It helps us detach from those anxieties and cultivate a sense of equanimity. And it ties into that Stoic idea of living in accordance with nature.
Ah, yes. This concept can be a bit tricky to grasp, can it? What does it mean to live in accordance with nature from a Stoic perspective?
Yeah, it's not just about spending time in nature, although I'm sure that doesn't hurt. It's about recognizing that we are part of this larger interconnected web of life and aligning ourselves with the natural order of things.
So it's about acknowledging the impermanence of all things.
Exactly. Change is inevitable. Loss is a part of life. We're not separate from the natural world. We're a part of it.
And this acceptance, however paradoxical it may sound, can lead to a greater sense of peace and tranquility. When we resist the natural flow of life, we create suffering for ourselves. But when we surrender to it, when we embrace change and uncertainty, we can actually find harmony.
It all comes back to focusing on what we can control. We can't control the weather, the opinions of others, or the traffic, but we can control our own thoughts, judgments, and responses.
And that's where true freedom lies, according to the Stoics. It's not about trying to bend the external world to our will. It's about mastering our inner world.
That's a profound idea, especially in today's world where we're bombarded with information and external stimuli. It's so easy to get swept up in that chaos and lose sight of what truly matters.
Stoicism offers a way to navigate that chaos with a bit more intention and clarity. It reminds us to slow down, observe our thoughts and emotions, and choose our responses wisely.
It's about living a life that's both meaningful and fulfilling, a life that aligns with our values and our principles.
And that's something we can all strive for, regardless of our individual circumstances or beliefs.
Now, it's important to remember that Stoicism isn't about achieving some kind of perfect state of Stoicism. It's about an ongoing practice, a lifelong journey of self-discovery and growth.
It's like working a muscle. You have to consistently train and challenge yourself in order to see progress.
One of the key tools for this ongoing practice is self-reflection. The Stoics were big on regularly examining their thoughts, actions, and motivations.
They kept journals, engaged in introspective conversations, and even sought feedback from trusted friends or mentors. It's about cultivating self-awareness and identifying areas where we can improve.
And it takes courage to be honest with ourselves, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. The Stoics believed that this kind of self-reflection was absolutely essential for moral and spiritual progress.
It's about becoming more conscious of our thoughts and actions and ultimately striving to live in a way that aligns with our highest ideals.
And it's about recognizing that this process is never truly finished. There's always room for growth, for learning, and for becoming a better version of ourselves.
That's what's so beautiful about Stoicism. It's both challenging and empowering. It asks us to confront our limitations while reminding us of our own potential for growth and transformation.
It's a philosophy that can help us navigate the complexities of modern life with more resilience, wisdom, and peace.
And its relevance is undeniable, even centuries after its inception.
Now, how about we explore some specific examples of how we can apply these Stoic principles in our daily lives?
Let's do it. Farnsworth offers a wealth of practical advice, everything from managing our emotions to dealing with difficult people. One area where Stoicism offers some particularly useful tools is in dealing with anger. It's something we all experience, but it can be such a destructive emotion if we let it, run wild.
Yeah, the Stoics had a lot to say about anger, didn't they? They actually saw it as a form of temporary madness, a lapse in reason that could lead to all sorts of impulsive and, harmful behavior.
They understood that anger often arises from our own unrealistic expectations, or from clinging too tightly to things that are ultimately beyond our control.
And they offered some really practical strategies for managing it. Things like taking a step back from the situation, trying to reframe our perspective, and practicing patience and forgiveness.
One technique that I find particularly helpful is to simply pause and observe your own thoughts and feelings without judgment. Just notice that anger arising, acknowledge it, but don't get swept away by it.
It's like creating that space between the trigger and your reaction, which allows you to choose a more constructive response.
Exactly. And it can be helpful to remind yourself that this anger, like everything else, is temporary. This too shall pass, as the Stoics often said.
By recognizing its fleeting nature, we can detach from it more easily and avoid letting it dictate our actions.
The Stoics also placed a lot of emphasis on forgiveness, not just for others, but also for ourselves.
Yeah, that can be tough.
Yeah.
But it's so important. Holding on to anger and resentment only poisons our own minds and keeps us stuck in the past.
Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning the behavior. It simply means releasing yourself from the burden of carrying that anger. It's about choosing peace over resentment.
It's a powerful act of self-care. Now, kind of shifting gears a bit, let's talk about how Stoicism can help us navigate grief and loss. It's something we all inevitably face at some point in our lives, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a job, or even a dream.
The Stoics understood that grief is a natural human emotion. They didn't advocate for suppressing it. However, they did believe we have a choice in how we respond to it.
They emphasized acceptance, accepting the reality of the loss without dwelling on it excessively or letting it consume our lives entirely.
They reminded us that while we can't bring back what we've lost, we can choose to focus on what we still have and to find meaning and purpose in our lives, even amidst the pain.
One of the Stoic exercises for dealing with grief is to practice gratitude. It might sound counterintuitive, but by focusing on what we're grateful for, even in times of loss, we can shift our perspective and appreciate what remains.
It's about finding those glimmers of light amidst the darkness. Another helpful concept is amor fati, or love of fate.
This doesn't mean we have to enjoy every single event in our lives, but it does mean accepting what life throws at us with a sense of equanimity, even embracing challenges as opportunities for growth.
It's about trusting that even though we can't control everything that happens to us, we can control our responses and choose to live our lives with courage, grace, and resilience.
And speaking of challenges, let's talk about the modern dilemma of information overload and constant distractions. It's something the Stoics didn't have to deal with, but their wisdom is surprisingly relevant to this digital age.
It really is. We're bombarded with notifications, emails, social media updates. It's exhausting. And it's so easy to get swept up in that frenzy and lose track of what truly matters.
But the Stoics were all about focusing on the essential and letting go of the superfluous. They advocated for the simple, intentional life, free from distractions and clutter.
This is where mindfulness can be such a powerful tool. By cultivating present moment awareness, we can learn to observe our thoughts and emotions without getting carried away by them. This can help us detach from that constant stream of distractions.
It's about reclaiming our attention and using it wisely. It's about making conscious choices about how we spend our time and energy.
We can set boundaries around our technology use, create dedicated time for focused work or creative pursuits, and prioritize spending time in nature or engaging in activities that nourish our souls.
It's about remembering that true happiness and fulfillment aren't found in constantly chasing novelty and stimulation, but in cultivating that deep sense of inner peace and contentment.
Now, before we wrap up, let's touch on the social dimension of Stoicism. It wasn't just about individual well-being, it was also about living a virtuous life and contributing to the common good.
Right. The Stoics believed in the interconnectedness of all things. They understood that we are all part of this larger community and that our actions have an impact on others.
One of their core virtues was justice. This meant treating everyone fairly and with respect, regardless of their social standing or background.
They believed in upholding the law and working to create a just and equitable society. They also emphasized compassion and empathy, seeing those qualities as essential for living a meaningful and ethical life.
Seneca wrote beautifully about the importance of recognizing our shared humanity and extending kindness and understanding to all.
And this ties into another Stoic virtue: wisdom. It's about seeking knowledge and understanding, not just for our own benefit, but to better serve others and contribute to making the world a better place.
The Stoics believed that true wisdom encompassed not just intellectual knowledge, but also practical wisdom, that ability to make sound judgments and act in accordance with our values.
And this brings us back to that idea of Stoicism as a lifelong practice. It's not about reaching some perfect state of Stoicism. It's about constantly striving to live a more virtuous and meaningful life.
It's about learning from our mistakes, cultivating good habits, and making choices that align with our values, even when those choices are difficult.
Now, as we approach the end of our exploration of the Practicing Stoic, I want to leave you with a question to ponder.
I always love a good thought-provoking question. What is it?
Think about a challenge you're currently facing in your life, something that's causing you stress or anxiety. How could you apply these Stoic principles to approach that challenge differently?
Perhaps it's about reframing your perspective, focusing on what you can control or practicing acceptance. Or maybe it's about reminding yourself of the impermanence of all things, finding gratitude for what you do have, or even practicing negative visualization.
Whatever the challenge, remember that Stoicism offers a framework for navigating it with greater resilience, wisdom, and peace. We encourage you to explore these ideas further. Maybe even experiment with some of the techniques that we've discussed, and just see how they might help you navigate the ups and downs of life with a little more grace and resilience.
Yeah, Stoicism isn't a quick fix. It's an ongoing journey of self-discovery and growth. And the beauty of it is that it's accessible to everyone. You don't need any special knowledge or training to start incorporating these principles into your life.
Exactly. And remember, the Practicing Stoic is a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to delve deeper into these ideas. Farnsworth provides clear explanations, practical examples, and even exercises to help you put these concepts into action.
Yeah, we've only scratched the surface today, but hopefully this has given you a taste of the wisdom and the practicality that Stoicism has to offer. It's a philosophy that can truly transform the way you approach life's challenges and find greater peace and fulfillment.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our exploration of the Practicing Stoic here on Wealth of Words, we're going to leave you with one final thought. Imagine for a moment that you could step outside of your current perspective and view your life as a story unfolding.
Ooh, I like this.
What would the Stoic version of your story look like? How would you approach those inevitable obstacles and setbacks with more wisdom, courage, and acceptance? What choices would you make differently, knowing that your power lies in your responses, not in trying to control the uncontrollable? We hope this episode has sparked some curiosity and inspired you to embrace the power of Stoic thinking.
And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and insights. Connect with us on social media or leave a comment on our website.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through the Practicing Stoic here on Wealth of Words. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking wisdom.
And may you find peace and fulfillment on your own Stoic path.